Hi, everyone. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. And today we're here to talk about the truth. Yikes. So here's the truth. I joined Facebook in May. I know, a little late to the Facebook party, right? But I had agreed to do this podcast, and a smart way to distribute it, and one of the smart ways to distribute it is by doing it on Facebook Live, and it made sense to have a Facebook account. So I'm still worried about, privacy settings and business models and fact checking, but I opened my Facebook account or created a Facebook page and started inviting people to be friends. And, for the most part in these last few weeks, it's been an absolute joy because I've been able to reconnect with and take a peek into the lives of friends and acquaintances and coworkers from ages ago, people I haven't seen in years, but I think of fondly, and it's really nice to get a look into their lives. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. And I've also had now the fully embodied experience of the kind of moral dilemmas and quandaries that one lives with when one has a Facebook page and checks it on a pretty regular basis. So, you know how it is, right? If you are watching me on Facebook, you have probably a Facebook page yourself. And it's summer, and isn't it wonderful? I get to see the flowers in my friend Becky's backyard. And I know that backyard, and I know the work she and her husband Brian have done, and it is gorgeous. And so I don't just give it a thumbs up. I love her backyard. I heart her backyard. I have other friends who are traveling not too far, but in places that are sometimes familiar to me, and showing their pictures of their travels or family trips. Again, I both like them, but I often love them. One of the things I've really enjoyed about being on Facebook is the fact that people that I've known, somebody I knew 30 years ago, somebody I knew 10 years ago, somebody I know now and is my kind of my daily life, all posting the same article or comment or meme or whatever on their timeline, and then shows up on mine. And I think, I do live in kind of a bubble, don't I? Because these people who don't know each other are all responding to the same thing out in the larger culture, and that always it starts to confuse me after a while about who knows whom, right, on my timeline. But I enjoy that. That's a lot of fun too. The quandaries come when I see something and say somebody posts an article, and I read the headline, and I their comment on it, and I think, yeah, absolutely, but I don't have time to read that article right now. So do I like it? Isn't that kind of a lie since I haven't actually read the article? I don't know. I'll just say to my Facebook friends, I'm not liking things I haven't actually read, but it does give me pause and makes me anxious, and I had to think hard about it. Or somebody posts a comment, and again, in this because of who my friends are, and because of the world we live in right now, and because it's an election year, and we're living through a pandemic, and we're living through a renewed but vigorous conversation about racial and social and economic justice in our country. People are posting things, commentary that's very hard hitting, and sometimes I read something somebody writes, and I agree with 75% of it. Do I like it? There's not a three quarters of a upward thumb I can give. Moral dilemma, social quandary. What's the truth of what's happening in this moment for me? And of course I know I'm not so naive. I have a friend on Facebook who has 1,700, I'll call them friends, but let's just say connections also on Facebook. Does he notice every time I do or do not like something that he posts? Of course not. Is anybody really watching it that closely? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Of course, we all know that the more people we're connected to, the fact that we don't see everything that everyone posts. So we don't try to take it too seriously, right? But I have also seen people get in disputes and arguments. If somebody says something with which I disagree, it's the most important thing for me to engage and say, I understand your position, but here's why I disagree. I'll be honest with you, I usually just pass it by. And the thing is, I have that PhD in communication studies, and I often fall back on that. And one of the things that we say as a kind of axiom or a truth about communication is that you cannot not communicate, right? Silence speaks, silence tells us something. And so, as we monitor those of us still engaged with Facebook, watching how people are reacting to us, how we're reacting to them, there is that sense of, when am I in the presence of my own integrity or the truth about how I feel about any particular thing that's coming my way? And what am I teaching people about how I handle the truth? So, the truth is our topic today. And it really springs from a conversation we left off 2 weeks ago on conflict. And truth and conflict have a lot to do with each other, don't they? And one of the things I mentioned 2 weeks ago was I read a quote from Martha Beck. And Martha Beck is a fantastic writer and coach, life coach, trainer, and a life coach herself. And she, a couple of years ago, started what she called the Integrity Cleanse, or a project for in her own life, in her own immediate life, and that she was sharing then with other people about how do we know when we're living in our own integrity. So I read this a couple of weeks ago, but I'm going to start here today on this question of integrity. And she says, the word integrity means wholeness. And she writes, living in integrity means expressing and doing what's true for you in all situations. And I always think the kicker there in that sentence is all situations. That's a pretty tall order. She writes, depart from your truth in any way, offer a fake smile, flatter your awful boss, marry for money, give a thumbs up emoji, I would add, when you don't necessarily have read the article or agree at 100%, and you become two people. You are the truth knower and the lie actor. What a great phrase, isn't that? The lie actor. Yikes. She writes, that's duplicity. And duplicity, not social noncompliance, is the real enemy of joy. Duplicity, not social noncompliance, is the real enemy of joy. So if I think of those phrases, going along to get along, that's social compliance. Doing what I think is expected of me, that's social compliance. Particularly doing it when my instincts, my gut, my experience tells me to do otherwise. That's social compliance. So social compliance, when it's insincere, right? When it doesn't come from an authentic place, that's what causes our suffering. That's the enemy of joy. And I don't think we often think of it that way, right? What does that phrase going along to get along even mean, right? It's smoothing the waters. Think of all these metaphors and little sayings we have about it. It's keeping the peace. It's not rocking the boat, right? We, I think, have it very turned around often in our daily lives and believe that compliance, social compliance, is actually what keeps the peace and gives us access to joy or happiness or reduces suffering. And so Beck's challenging idea is to say no. When it's insincere, when it doesn't come from an authentic place, it is in fact the cause of suffering. And why is that? And it's because, I would say, going back to what she writes, we're living with a truth knower and a lie actor, right? The suffering is internal. It is the conflict and the dissension between the truth actor or the lie actor and the truth knower. That's why we're experiencing suffering, when we're simply trying to go along to get along. That's addressing that is a pretty tall order. And so let's do it from a more mindful, calm place. So, in order to do that, what do? We breathe. We breathe and we pay attention to our breathing so that we can be calm, so that we can focus our mind, so that we can enhance clarity. And we're going to pause after we inhale, and then we're going to make the exhalation slightly longer than the inhale. And an easy way to do that is to count on the inhale, pause, and then count slightly longer on the exhale. This is Lori Cameron, a mindfulness educator. Her practice called 3 deep breaths. So after you take the first breath, just notice as you're doing it, the physical sensation of the air entering and exiting your body. For the second breath, just notice any place in your body where you feel tension and relax. And then for that third breath, just imagine what your intention is for this moment, say just for the next few moments, right? Whatever it is that you need right now. So breath number 1, just pay attention to your breathing. Breath 2, relax. And breath 3, what's your intention for right now? Thanks for joining me with that. So today we're talking about the truth, our truth, what it means to act with integrity, to be whole in each moment of our life. And Beck challenges us to notice when we act insincerely in order to be seen as good people, as a person who understands what society expects from us. What she's describing, in fact, is the opposite of mindfulness. It's the opposite of bringing our attention to the present moment without judgment. It is acting in a mindless way, just going along to get along. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the obstacles to being a truth knower and what we can do to bring more mindfulness into our daily practice so that we can live from a place of integrity. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. Please come back after the break. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. Thanks for joining me today. We are talking about the truth. And in particular, we're talking in this segment about what is it that, in Martha Beck's words, creates duplicity within us? Why is it that we resist not only knowing but acting on the truth, and being the truth knower or our authentic self? And when is it that we, instead, going along to get along or whatever might motivate us, are really being duplicitous with ourselves and being what she calls the lie actor? So I want to talk about some things that I've noticed that get in my way, that my friends and clients and I talk about getting in their way. And I think the first word that comes to mind is fear, that we are often afraid of the truth. And it can take so many different forms. It can happen in so many different ways in our life. One of the things that I hear the most often, and I know I deal with in my own life, is the fear that exploring the truth and telling the truth will cause another person's suffering. Right? How many times in the course of our daily lives do we say something along the lines of, "I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to tell her no, I don't want to tell her what I really think. I don't want to tell him this isn't working out because I don't want to hurt his or her feelings, their feelings," right? So often, if we kind of slow down and look at those moments where we say, "I'm afraid to tell somebody else the truth because I'm afraid the truth, what is true for me, will be painful to them," is really us, getting in the other person's business, trying to do their thinking and feeling for them. And I often say that, we're correct. We predict another person's feelings or thoughts just often enough, correctly, just often enough, that we think that it's a good idea to keep trying. But if we slow down to think about what's really happening or how we would feel in that situation, sometimes we get mad at people for not taking our feelings sufficiently into account. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But we also don't really, for the most part, like people to do our thinking for us, to predict how we're going to react, how we might feel about something. And so when we modify what is true for us in order to, we think, serve the other person, we're certainly not serving ourselves well, and we probably aren't serving the other person particularly well either. But I have to ask myself, what is it about that fear of causing the other person suffering that's really going on? And I think it can be that we don't want to cause the other person suffering. I think that's genuine and sincere. But also, I think we're afraid of what it says about us if we're a person who causes another to be unhappy. And when it comes to feelings, of course, this is all very tricky language. If I say something and your feelings are hurt, I want to be cautious about saying I'm the cause, especially if what I've said is the truth, is at least my truth, right? I don't think I have to say things in a nasty way in order to say the truth, but I can tell somebody the truth and hurt their feelings and not necessarily be a bad person as a result, right? If what I'm saying is, the kind of the criteria is it true and is it kind? If it's true and it's kind, and you are hurt by that, then maybe we got to explore what's happening there that makes it hard for you to hear what's true. And the situation that comes to mind for me is working with people who supervise other people, right? Either you've had this experience maybe, or as a supervisor, or maybe as someone who has a colleague who isn't really great at the job, right? Somebody who's really not really doing their best all the time, or maybe is a terrible fit for the position, and a supervisor who doesn't want to tell them that truth, right? Well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And so everyone suffers. This is another way of thinking about wholeness. One way to talk about wholeness is that, what impacts one part of a system impacts the whole system. So one supervisor who can't tell one poor performing employee the truth is creating a situation where everyone struggles, where everyone is unhappy, where everyone is struggling honestly with their authentic self and what's the truth and how do I deal with this. So when we say to ourselves, I can't say it because it might hurt your feelings, I think two things we can do is, how can I say it in a way that you can hear, that isn't from a place of anger or frustration or that sort of thing, but is simply the truth. And also, in not telling the truth, am I doing more harm? So but I think that fear is one kind of fear that keeps us from telling the truth. Another kind that I've really noticed a lot lately is what I would say is fear of what the truth says about us in other respects. And one example that comes to mind of this is polarization, and we talk about living in a highly polarized culture. So the other day, I was reading an article in the New York Times about people in a different part of the country from where I live, but actually where I used to live, whose political beliefs are completely divergent from my own. So I was reading the article, and I noticed that I was really reading it on two levels. One, maybe three, because I was just trying to pay attention to what was being said and what these folks were saying about their experience and how they see the world. So I was trying to just read it in terms of information. But I was also noticing, of course, my thinking mind was countering their arguments, right? They say this, like that. Here's why I think that's not true. Here's my counter evidence, right? So I'm really kind of arguing back with the folks in the article. But the third thing I noticed was my tension. I was getting very tense and anxious inside. And I spent some time after reading the article thinking about my reaction to it. And I wasn't very comfortable with this, but what I began to realize is that as I paid attention to the physiological response I had as I was reading the article, I realized it was a fear response. That some of the positions that these folks claim to have, to me, are threatening. They threaten my well-being. They threaten my happiness. They threaten, I would say, my civil rights. And interestingly, what they were saying, many of these folks, is how frightened they are, how threatened they feel, how they feel that their rights are being encroached upon. And what was one of the things that was scary about it was realizing that's a lot to have in common, right? That deep sense of fear of my freedom, my civil liberties, my rights as a citizen are encroached upon by someone whose beliefs are quite divergent from mine. And at the same time, for us to have such a similar physiological and emotional response to, in some ways, the same information was really powerful. Not super comfortable, but really powerful. So I think sometimes when the truth is a fearful place, it's because of what it tells us about ourselves. So I have another story I want to tell you about that, where a lot of these things came to pass for me, or came to a deeper understanding for me. So my partner and I write a lot of different kinds of things through the course of our work, and we often ask the other person to read for us. So this happened a week or so ago. I asked my partner to read something that I'd written, and when she was done, she said, we were face to face, so she was in my office, and she gave me two suggestions of things I ought to change, and she made a correction. And as she was telling me this, fortunately, I think it's because of the physical space I was in, I'm so used to doing a kind of mindfulness practice in it, that I started to feel anxious, right? Tense, closing down a little bit in the face of her suggestions about what I had written. And I was so grateful and lucky in this moment because I could see it happening. And, so my body was reacting, my body was starting to kind of go tearing down the street. And of course, my ego, my mind was like, wait for me. I've got a million stories of ways I can make you feel even worse, right? Because you are really a terrible writer and you are so afraid of being a terrible writer. And wow, it's like we're in seventh grade and we can't diagram a sentence again. Or maybe it's like when you couldn't finish your dissertation. I mean, wow, my body was there and my mind was so eager to catch up and make it so much worse. So I was very grateful because I saw it. I saw it happening. I saw myself going there. I tried to breathe and I walked closer to where my partner was sitting at the computer and I said, so tell me about the first one. And she said, I think you need another sentence or two. And I said, do you mean like, and I just said the sentence. And she said, oh, yeah, exactly. And what was interesting to me about this was I already had the sentence in my head. I already knew that I needed more information there. And she had just pointed out what I already knew. And we figured out the other thing, and it was very helpful. So here's what I noticed after this incident. I realized that I could ask for what I needed and not expect her to know. And that, in a sense, is part of my integrity, right? Of saying, I know what I need in this situation. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm sorry. I forgot this part of the story, which is very critical. So we talked about the changes. And then I said to her, is there anything you like about it? Like, do you think it's well written? And she said, oh, yeah, it's excellent. That's the part where I realized I could ask for what I needed. I'm human, right? This is who I am. Writing makes me anxious. If I'm going to give somebody something to read, if they don't praise it, I'm just going to ask, did you like it? Did you think it was well written? And I didn't need to expect her to know that that's what I needed, that she needed to frame her criticism in praise in order for me to be psychologically whole and comfortable, that I could do that for myself. And to me, that's living in my integrity. I also realized that a week earlier, she had given me something to read. It was a grant proposal. And I read it and it was on a Google Doc. And so I corrected a couple of typos. And then I made a couple of comments, a place where I thought information was being repeated, and another place where I thought things were not spelled out and she needed a more concrete example. And I sent it back to her. And I didn't say anything about how well written it was. I didn't praise it at all. I did what she asked, just as she had done what I asked. She asked for feedback, I gave her feedback. I asked her for feedback, she gave me feedback, right? But we're very different in this way. She doesn't need everything in a velvet glove, and I prefer the velvet glove. But look, I can ask for it. So that was really exciting. But the third thing that I noticed is this question of um, when I react from my ego, right? When my ego gets away from me, and I'm hurt or I'm sad, and I have a snippy response back or sarcastic, or, that question, did you like it? Was it well written? Could have been, well, did you like it? Was it well written? I mean, can you at least give me that, right? That kind of tone. And when I do react that way, and I'll be honest, I have, I'm showing her something about how I can deal with the truth, right? And to quote Jack Nicholson, I'm showing her that I can't handle the truth. And so how does that then shape how she is able to tell me the truth and live in her integrity? So these questions, I think, particularly in close relationships, but really in any place where we deal with other people quite a bit, there is this sense of we are creating these dynamics of truthfulness or of being lie actors with each other. Because the way we react to other people telling us the truth tells them what we can and cannot and will not handle. And that then puts them in a bit of a quandary. So it's not always just all about us. So we are going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about ways that we might be able to use mindfulness strategies and other strategies to be able to notice what our truth is, right? What our authentic self is saying to us. And also those places where that lie actor is quick to jump in and want to sort of take things over and run with it. So you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio, and we'll be right back after the break. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and thank you for joining me today. Today, we're talking about the truth, and the truth is a difficult taskmaster, isn't it? What a terrible expression, taskmaster. But It's hard. It's hard if we think clearly and closely about the course of our daily life, of every word that comes out of our mouth, every thing that we react to on social media, everything we write, every thought, has the opportunity to put us in that space of being the truth knower, but also is always because of the intensity of our need sometimes and the culture's pressure on us to comply with social norms and conventions, to put us in that at risk of always being a lie actor as well, as Martha Beck calls it. So one thing that's you may or may not be aware of, and that I've learned through having friends who've been through the recovery process is, and this has been a tool that's been really helpful to me to think about, is in 12-step programs. The fourth step is a step where people are asked to make a searching and fearless moral inventory. So the step reads, make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves and the negative thoughts, emotions, and actions that have ruled our life. And I think this is an incredible mindfulness suggestion, really. I think there's lots of ways in which some of the 12-step language and precepts really are very much resonate with mindfulness practices. And this is one, that fearless moral inventory. But what I notice, and what my friends who've been through recovery have talked to me about, is the idea that one of the things that happens, both for people in 12 step, but I think for most of us in regular life, is that we get really good at doing what people in 12 step would call taking other people's inventory. And it can be extremely daunting to take our own. And we've talked in the previous segment about some of the barriers to it, that there is a lot of fear associated with being very clear with ourselves, with really noticing what's happening and what's true for us, and what's true about us. That can be it can be extremely uncomfortable. So I want to talk some more about, from the mindfulness perspective, ways to think about this. And I read an article recently by Rodney Smith, who is the founding director of the Seattle Institute for, no, that's Sims, Seattle Institute for Mindfulness Society. No, Seattle Insight Meditation Society. I'm sorry, Seattle Insight Meditation Society. And he wrote a really excellent article about stillness. And one of the things he said is that, a still mind is not closed, it is awake and alert. And stillness is that place that we often, if we meditate, that we're trying to get to. Quiet, but awake and alert, not closed, not even really entirely empty. And he puts this in a context. I'm going to maybe seem like I'm going a little bit to one side, but I'll come right back to the truth, I promise. So he writes that we can recover the sacred in the most remote areas of our lives. Awakening, he says, is immediately available within all areas of our lives, right? It's not something that's confined to a meditation practice. He says in family and work and community, and we don't have to spiritually prioritize one over the other. He writes, the Buddha is found not only in special environments or practices, but within all activities, reactions, thought, and emotional responses, right where we are. That's both an extremely liberating thought that I can reach stillness and awake, alert, present to the moment in any moment of my life, not just in a meditation practice. But it's also daunting, isn't it? Because if it's available to me, then maybe there's that sense of I should be trying to achieve it in every second of the day. So I think that practicing stillness can, really does make us think that it's about meditation. And one thing that makes meditation difficult is it's not just that our minds might remain active and can't really quiet down. It's that the content of that thinking often includes questions and judgments about the meditation practice itself, right? So we might find it incredibly difficult to sit still for 10 minutes, and almost impossible to quiet our mind for 10 minutes, and impossible not to interrupt ourselves with constant string of questions and critiques about what we're doing, right? Am I doing it right? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be thinking and noticing? And most of all, is the time up yet? So the idea that we could bring the quality of alertness and awakeness and awareness that we seek in meditation to the rest of our life can seem kind of far-fetched. But Smith in the article truly addresses this dilemma with a very challenging idea. And he says that when we make mindfulness our goal, we are, in a sense, doing it all wrong. Not that mindfulness is wrong, but when we phrase it as a goal, as something we strive to achieve in meditation or in the rest or throughout our daily life, we're going to fail because we're keeping our ego at the center of our awareness rather than simply allowing ourselves to be alert, aware, and awake. So when we say, I'm trying as hard as I can in this moment to be mindful, the most important word or the most key word in that sentence is I. I'm trying, I'm trying, I'm trying, right? So meditation or mindfulness rather, as a strenuous effort, it keeps the ego at the center. And you can even imagine mindfulness practice, right? A formal practice. And people do think about this, and I'm guilty too. Am I going to get an A in mindfulness, right? Will the meditation guide be impressed with my even deep breathing, with my upright posture, with my stillness, right? Yikes, it's all me, me, me. So Smith says the problem of how to be mindful is actually resolved not through strenuous effort, right? Not through gripping hard onto that prospect of being fully present to the moment, but by relaxing, allowing, and observing what is already there. So, relaxing, allowing, and observing what is already there is really a companion to allowing a searching and fearless moral inventory, right? Knowing that we may find what we may find there is troubling, but not letting that stop us. Because, when I talked earlier about the obstacles to being in our truth, it is that obstacle ultimately of being afraid of what we'll find in the stillness of our own interior self, right? And I would say, in a meditation practice, I have cried. In a meditation practice, I have noticed and said and allowed myself to notice what was right there. And what was right there was a string of imperfections, right? I have not always been a good friend. I have not always been an honest person. I have not always lived up to maybe other people's expectations for me or my own expectations for myself. I'm just like you, right? I'm human. So, in a mindfulness practice, to allow that is to allow strong emotions. It's the truth not only about ourselves and our failings and our weaknesses, but about other people in our lives, maybe who we feel have failed us. It can be very bracing, it can be disturbing, it can be upsetting, and at the same time, it can be liberating, right? To accept and acknowledge the truth of our lives. And there are two really important things that go with that. One is the idea, the deeply held Buddhist idea that is so obviously true in everyday life, which is impermanence, right? Those feelings, as hard as they may be in that moment, will pass if we allow them to pass. If we don't seek to grasp them and hold on too tightly to them, if we allow those hard feelings to pass through us, they will shift over time. And the second, I think, equally true thing that is very hard, and I've said this before whenever I talk to clients about this, it's very hard for them to accept this idea that you are enough just as you are, right? So I sit in meditation, or make the bed in a quiet mind, or I'm just awake, alert, and aware in the course of my interactions with others, and the truth about my own limitations come to mind. And the sadness or the shame or the difficult feelings that accompany that awareness is right there too. And I know two things. It will pass, and I'm okay. I'm enough just as I am. It's really true. It's hard to hold on to, but it's really true. So, um, a couple of other things that I would recommend as we talk about these issues is, someone like the work of someone like Byron Katie, right, on loving what is. Right, she's not talking about just loving what is and that the sunshine and rainbows and beautiful walks in the woods, but the hard things too. It's asking that kind of question: Who would I be without the self judgment? Who would I be in the absence of taking somebody else's moral inventory? Right. And the thing that I try really hard to with in that sense to remember and to reinforce in my own behavior and daily life is that the only person's behavior I need to monitor is my own, right? I don't actually need to take other people's inventory because taking my own, monitoring my own behavior and my thoughts and my feelings and my physiological reactions, all of that at the same time, that's enough work. That's enough for me to be able to do in the course of a day. But think about how often our mind turns to the other person and what they've done just not quite right, what they could have done that would have just been a little bit better, how you would have done it so that it worked a little bit more effectively. Like our capacity to critique other people is endless. And it doesn't mean that it never needs to be done. I would never say that. But um, how can we shift and ask ourselves first, but what's happening for me? What's true for me? And then, and I think what tags along with that is the communication theory that we talked about 2 weeks ago, right? That I can treat another, I can disagree with another, right? I can be truthful about what's true for me with another person without disconfirming them as a human being. And if I remember that, and if I can put that into practice, then I don't have to be fearful that I'm the bad guy because I told somebody the truth, right? If I know that what I'm saying is kind and true, then their reaction is their responsibility, and that's okay, right? So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the truth and the challenge of telling the truth in our daily lives. And I'm Mariangela Maguire, and you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and today we're talking about the truth and what the challenges are to our integrity, what it is that makes it difficult for us to live with our integrity, which is to live in our wholeness, to be whole and truthful about what we think and what we feel throughout the course of our day. In every interaction, of really noticing the insincere smile, the insincere thumbs up on Facebook, the effort to shield other people from the truth because we don't want to be seen as the bad guy, to shield ourselves from the truth about places where we may not like what we see when we notice really how we think and how we feel and how we've behaved in the world. And doing that, knowing that there is that thing that the Buddhists call the wanting mind, right? It's that mind, that part of our ego that wants praise and acceptance and love and success, but that belief that the only way we can get it is by grasping it really tightly, right? And that's that kind of grasp that actually chokes the life out of those things. And then also by pushing away anything, rejecting anything that appears to threaten our access to those feelings and experiences of love and acceptance. And so when we do that, of course, we're in that space that someone like Martha Beck would call the lie actor space, where we feel as though we have to comply with norms and social conventions because that's the only way that we'll be accepted by other people. That the truth of who we are, that our deepest truths, are so tainted, so damaged, so shameful that no one else would love us, care for us, or accept us if they knew the truth. And of course, that's that little thing. We know the truth. We know what's true for us. We know what our experiences have been. We know the mistakes we've made, our regrets, the places where we've been unkind, where we've been inconstant, where we've been untruthful. And so, what we've been talking about is what does it mean to bring our minds to stillness, both in a meditation practice, but also in the course of our daily lives, such that we can notice what is true in our bodies and what is true in our minds. And in that, know two things: that no matter how hard or uncomfortable or painful those feelings may be, we don't have to grasp them. We can have an open hand towards them, acknowledge them, and allow them to pass through us because that's the nature of reality, right? Impermanence. And those feelings can pass through us. It's a choice a bit, though, to say, am I going to hold on to that? Am I going to grasp that tightly, that bad feeling, that self judgment? Or am I going to say, I see it, I know it's true, I want to be better, maybe. I'm trying to be more truthful in my life, and I allow those difficult feelings to pass. And at the same time, acknowledge what is can be extremely difficult to acknowledge, especially when we're noticing our imperfections, which is that despite them or because of them, we are enough just as we are. Really and truly, in our imperfections, we are enough just as we are. So that's the beauty of trying to find integrity in our daily life. Not only that it frees us from those kinds of struggles and moral quandaries about how we're seen by other people, but that there is real freedom and liberation in it. So, as we move forward, I want to say if this is the kind of conversation you'd like to have more of, because maybe, and this is something that my clients talk with me about quite a bit, which is that feeling of being stuck. And sometimes when we talk about stuckness, we think of maybe an unhappy job situation or living in a place that maybe doesn't really suit our how we want to live our lives, or maybe a relationship that we feel is maybe no longer serving our needs, is no longer in our best interest, but we don't know how to get out of it. We're stuck. And stuck is a really useful word in some respects, and it shows us. It has that kind of metaphorical quality of, is the stuckness in quicksand? Am I in a vice? Have I fallen in a cliff and I'm stuck between two rocks? It's like the guy in that movie who had to saw his arm off, right? And because that's the next question is, how do I get unstuck, right? He had to find a knife and saw his arm off. I don't think it necessarily has to come to that, although in terms of emotional pain, it can feel that way. Because to get unstuck is to try to work towards mindfulness, not in that grasping way, not in the goal setting way, but in that relax, be aware of what is simply present right now, with the challenge and the risk that what is present right now may be very uncomfortable, maybe close to downright unpleasant. And so that's what I work with people to talk about is how do I get unstuck, so that I can see the truth of my feelings and my needs with regard to that job that I have, that relationship that's troubling me, a lifestyle that no longer I think suits me. But when we talk about those things, and what I'm always kind of thrilled to notice when people do work with me is that sometimes, usually within a few weeks, what they notice is that it's not really necessarily about the job or the relationship or the place. It's about what's happening inside. And the dissatisfaction with the job or the relationship or the place is a result of living in duplicity, right? Of feeling as if you are simply going along to get along, living in a place of total social compliance, so that other people think you're a good person, but inside knowing that there is a truth knower who is watching the lie actor and wanting to resolve those two things. And sometimes the resolution, coming to your truth about the relationship, the place, or the job, doesn't mean that those things have to go away, but it does transform your relationship to them, which can be very challenging. But it's totally liberating as well, which is the most important thing and really what we're after here. So we're going to do a little wrap up here. We're going to start by breathing again. I hope that you've taken some ideas here about what gets in the way of you living in your truth, living with integrity, to find those hot spots, those places where it is most difficult for you to tell the truth, and to allow yourself to simply relax and be aware and notice what is present in your body and in your mind so that you can bring your authentic self to each of the moments of your day. And breathing always helps. So we're going to do 3 deep breaths again. Breath number 1, just notice the breath going in and out of your body. Breath number 2, just notice any place where you're feeling tension and relax. And breath number 3, what do you need for the next hour, for the next moments in your life? If you would like to find out more about my work or to work with me as a life coach or a communication coach, you can visit my website, which is maguirelifecoach.com. That's Maguire, Maguire, lifecoach.com. And you can also email me at mariangelamaguire@gmail.com. That's the big one. mariangelamagure@gmail.com. Yes, I did learn most of the alphabet as a child just by learning to spell my own name. So next week, oh, and with my work, you should always know that first conversation is free, and we'll talk about what you want to achieve through coaching. I'll describe the inquiry method that I use with clients to allow people to talk about what's most important to them. We'll have a short session in that first session so that you can determine if working with me will serve your needs. And you can visit my website again, maguirelifecoach.com, or email me at mariangelamaguire.com. I hope you'll join me next Thursday. We every other week is what I call the Voices series, and my guest next week is Sherelle Wallace. She is a mom, a caregiver, a coach. I'm sorry, not a coach, but a podcaster like me, which she has a great podcast that she'll be talking about. And she has an incredible t-shirt business. And I would suggest that what Sherelle will tell you is the most important thing in her life is her faith commitments. And she's going to talk to us about a number of issues, but I think at the center of that will be how her faith shapes her life and the decisions that she makes in her life. So I hope you can join me. In the meantime, I hope you'll be curious about your mind and be kind to yourself. Thanks for being here today on Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio.